But let's get back to politics now and catch up with Liberal Senator for New South Wales, Hollie Hughes. Thanks for joining us, Hollie. First up, China and wine. Just how damaging is this going to be to wine exports?
Look, the tariffs that have been put on today in an interim's perspective are absolutely prohibitive to our winemakers. There's no shadow of a doubt about that. What we do need to remember, though, when we're talking about what's happening with wine as opposed to coal and some other of our exports, this is actually the result of a formal investigation. So it's an interim report and these are interim tariffs. So the Minister has spoken to the industry today and there are official conversations going on, and there is hope that those interim tariffs can be removed or reduced because, frankly, at 200%, they're just prohibitive for the market. But it is important also that when we look at the wine market, over the last couple of years, Japan and Canada have opened up to us substantially. And also, as we move towards the EU and UK free trade agreements, there's huge opportunities for our winemakers into the future. China's obviously been a very significant part of the wine export industry, but anti-dumping seems highly unlikely, and I know the industry is refuting those claims because I don't know about you, Chris, but if you've ever been to China, a $15 bottle of wine here can be upwards of $200 in China. So the fact that they're looking at anti-dumping as part of the reasoning behind this just seems to be extraordinary.
Yeah, it's just rubbish. They're just trying to hurt us, and hurt us it will. I'm going to do my bit for the wine industry tonight and drink a bottle of South Australian Red.
Well, you know, you're out of quarantine now, so you're free to do so.
Don't worry, there's plenty of drinking in quarantine. That's one of the greatest risks in there, I reckon. Now, tell us about the Australians stranded overseas. What can the federal government do? What more can the federal government do to get more Aussies back into Australia?
Look, at the end of the day, it comes down to quarantine spots. And I think when we do look at the fact Victoria, New South Wales, everyone is now claiming that they're fundamentally COVID-free when it comes to community transmission. But the only cases that we are seeing are in quarantine. So the importance of those quarantine procedures is evident. That's where any COVID that's coming into Australia is coming from people coming in from overseas. I have heard, you know, you're speaking to earlier guests around different provisions from low-risk countries. But I think at the end of the day, we do need to be mindful. We're an island. We're doing so much better than everybody else around the world, fundamentally. And we need to make sure that we maintain that. And quarantine is an important part of it.
Sure, but if the states aren't doing enough, can Canberra...
The states aren't doing enough. And you've got to remember, Queensland was shut down and was hosting about 200 people a week. Victoria has been shut down for months because of their hotel quarantine fiasco. And the fact of the matter is they were locked out of being able to quarantine anybody for absolutely months. New South Wales has been carrying the absolute burden here. We are doing in excess of 500 people a day coming into New South Wales. WA, they are not holding their end of the bargain. There are people coming in from South Africa and other countries much closer to Perth, and they're not allowed to go there. It's absolutely abhorrent the way Mark McGowan's continuing to behave. I mean, I grew up in Perth for a little bit, and this is just secession by stealth. I mean, they would love to secede most West Australians, and that's why I think you're seeing his poll numbers so high.
I don't think they'll succeed.
They're not carrying their end of the bargain.
They certainly aren't.
Up their end of the bargain when it's coming to quarantine.
They're taking the JobKeeper payments.
Yeah,
well, they've got to do it. They've got to do it.
But if they want to see more Australian time, we need more quarantine.
Sure. Yep, and speaking of the states and the way they've managed this thing, no Premier has done a better job of managing all this than Gladys Berejiklian. Yet she's managed to get herself into a bit of political strife on other issues in recent weeks. And have a look at what she had to say yesterday about a government grant scheme where many people, critics, have accused it of being electoral pork barrelling. Here's what the Premier said.
All governments and all oppositions make commitments to the community in order to curry favour. I think that's part of the political process, whether we like it or not. The term pork barrelling is common parlance in where you provide funding, and it's not something that I know the community is comfortable with. And if that's the accusation made on this occasion, given the number of seats or the places that that funding went to, well then I'm happy to accept that commentary.
Call it pork barrelling if you like, says the Premier. Is that refreshing honesty or a fatal admission?
Look, I think I'll let Gladys speak for herself for what she meant when she said that. New South Wales government obviously manages their own budget and how they run out their own projects. But I don't think it should be lost when Gladys does, if she has made a misstep there. Overall, the work that she has done on quarantine has been extraordinary. New South Wales is the gold standard when it has come to keeping our economy open, keeping people in jobs and making sure that everyone in the New South Wales economy and community is benefiting from the fact that we have conducted ourselves and managed a quarantine program, a contact tracing program in New South Wales, that all of that has been managed so effectively and so efficiently with an economy still open so that people are still able to work.
I agree with that, but I suppose I'm interested in the politics here for a change. Normally I'm only interested in the actual substance, but it appears to me, naive political observer that I am, that there's been a series of leaks.
And we all know that's not true, Chris.
There's been a series of leaks, damaging leaks against Gladys Berejiklian, and it looks very much like there are people in her own party leaking against her at the moment.
Look, I would agree with you there. I think there's definitely some ambitious members of her team, but that's not uncommon in politics, and you know that.
Who would be doing that to her?
Look, I wouldn't even hazard a guess as to who that is. I'm sure those in the New South Wales parliamentary team are much more clued into that. But I think certainly you can see that there's potentially some undermining of Gladys occurring at the moment. And perhaps some people, you know, aren't that happy that she's doing such a great job, and certainly looks like she's there for the long haul, which I'm particularly pleased about.
Hollie Hughes, thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Chris.
There you go, Hollie Hughes, a Liberal Senator for New South Wales, telling you that it looks like Gladys Berejiklian is being undermined by ministers in her own government. That's what it looked like to me. Fascinating admission there, fascinating claim by the New South Wales Liberal Senator.